Hello, a couple times. I fought in Washington, D.C. in a mayor's cup. Marion Barry had a mayor's cup. And I mentioned when I was in Arabic class to learn the language of Arabic after the World Trade Center attack to the teacher, a Dr. Shu, and he had a weird reaction, like he couldn't believe that there was homelessness in there. I found out more and more. Record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. He has roles with multiple courts, multiple probate courts, but also superior court and a district court with a whole bunch of people directly and indirectly with the same house/S, involved increasingly with predicate acts of Wethersfield police since I was a kid, falsified police reports, a whole bunch of people from other areas putting fake things on my street, like a Robert Rodriguez who brought up a principal child abusers campus, and people with the name Scalora involved. And there are other people with Hartford Hospital's Institute of Living that worked there that I never met, and people that I never had a word of conversation with that pretended other, as families that worked there. One of them had one word sarcastically with apparently the father of Brendan Leahy, also with the same name. Increasingly involved with people with corners of buildings and corners of streets who have collusion/S with the differences of guilt of the names at crime scenes and next to them, and body dumping spots, and people associated with home break-ins in my area through time involved also with them. People at and next to Harvard Hospital, the houses and businesses there, and including a Demorals Market where it was in the past and where it is now. They have collusions with some Mendez police at the Bridge Superior Court with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, and at the Wethersfield police station where the older one pretended he had words with me, ever. And they forced Saudis to collusions with them with that. And they were recorded involved with the people who asked for help before the World Trade Center attack. They forced Saudis to collusions also with a whole bunch of different countries, and they're hiding behind the differences of guilt. Increasingly, there are people with Russia too. This Russians against Russians with psychiatry. They have ones with badges and titles who have roles with psychiatry, all kinds of criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, principles of reason treatments. And fake transcripts and databases no one's looking into, collusion/S with all crime scenes, and then to hide that. And that screens a hyperforeign, which is really relative to, for example, really why and how the suburbs, there were houses built before America's founders were born. There were more than 13 states entrenched with roles with slavery even forced, northern colonies and southern colonies, changing what nature communicates with black pupils, whites of eyes, and exceptions, changing what nature communicates with such relativity/hyperrelativities to itself too, the hyperrelativity generating these things, generating totally individual species bodies, made up each one of them of a whole bunch of individual bodies, so we could discern to an extent its individual identity of value/value progression, so we could correlate its hypercorrelation. And 3 hypercorrelations connected, where and how there are self-value roles being used remotely as countries A through Z, through the voices of locations, areas, and states everywhere the species body is, reliant upon nature of logic, natures of debate, quality aspects of nature that can't defend themselves and afford to overcome what exploits those quality aspects of nature, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought. You guys are replaced with James Madison, and our founders communicated for themselves. You guys want to pretend that's a debatable, self-valuing roles without having been done. We're directed to understand clearer than day why and how James Madison is the only founder that we know the name of, and his plan was to counter-extort everyone else. That's how and why we had a Declaration of Independence. That's why everyone had to hide their actual roles. They couldn't say, "Oh, James Madison counter-extorted us." at key locations. Again, there were more than 13 states. There were more than 13 colonies, rather. And they had roles with even the craziest things sustained selves against selves. So no location, area in the state has people that didn't hurt other people, fact, human nature-wise, therefore physically. And while they're pretending other, it's manifest that way because the breaching method is using them, having been using everyone remotely. That's why and how they pretend things, they blame things on politics, leaving out its roles with that. This breaching method showed them how to speak about history, not just our founders, not just black pupils, whites of eyes. Don't shoot. You guys can't even discern the breaching method. You guys aren't even allowed to. They want to have a debate about what they know. And meanwhile, you read something that's more important. It's more important to know right up front, James Madison, he still didn't have free speech. No one had free speech. Everyone had to pretend other to an extent, otherwise be sentenced. Who wants to debate that will have inherent too active, too progressive to their logic, their nature of logic, demonstration / just of the same thing. That's why and how Judge Napolitano has a Jeffrey Sachs on there repeating about the Monroe Doctrine. In other words, as collusion / S being used to sense for the breaching method too, not even realizing, or not completely, because James Madison's plan was to come. Well, James Madison was still tortured, extorted, in fact, human nature enslaved. And the breaching method behind that is what they were trying to counter. But no one could speak with each other. All exceptions, that was contained. There was equality. There were qualities / qualities of aspects. In fact, human nature itself has criminal insidiousness / hypercriminal insidiousness relative with the guilt, too. This breaching method knew that nature would demonstrate to humanity. One of the things all those crazy laws imposed upon our founders and everyone were about at the same time, even though they were all about distinct things. And they were distinct ways. They were all about a human nature breaching method and the roles with it as a human nature breaching method / S. Because the nature too, oh, come on, preventing people from calmness or from aggression to force that principal treatments. We would have had the black people's whites of eyes as nature shows them to be. And as our founders' actual communication shows them to be inseparable from any halfway proper treatment of American history. You guys have a shell game. You guys are being used to sense for the breaching method, self-value roles, with people pretending it's debatable, that the people were involved, even as the presidents / chiefs, they weren't our founders. James Madison's the only founder we know the name of. You guys were supposed to allow people to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. Part of the reason you can't do it is your tactical delusions raw, because of how this breaching method showed names A through Z. They had to hide about how they've been speaking about principles and collusion / S with that in physics. And then it shows them how to get away with it. So it shows them they have to hide their collusions with it. So, by having the teachers stay stuck, directed to teach things wrong or sense. And it shows them nature's demonstration that they have to simultaneously showing them they have to keep other things, others ourselves blamed for how no one speaks for a reason properly. And why and how were our collusion / S with crime scenes increasingly at campuses. This is like the hypercrime scene, so to speak, relative to the black people's whites of eyes communications and the nature of debate of people refusing to respond to others. See, Weathersfield police in the courts and the FBI and state police and forensics names, they have wire and mail crime, digital crime acts and methods, where and how they'll just blindly defend their titles, the difference of their job as an excuse. we're in how all those types of jobs, no one's capable of responding to how that is exploited. In other words, they have collusions at all natures of crime scenes, including at and next to body dumping spots with the same ones. And this increasingly got brought up timed collusions with it. Use/S of it too. These are people directing you guys to pretend that others made conspiracy theories. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. It's all recorded. Get me off the fake conversations with WFSB. Simultaneously, WTNH sources have people named O'Neill involved with West Hartford campuses with their students, the difference of their students' guilt, their own guilt, the federal agencies, and other campuses, and their kids. They have their kids involved with wire crimes and digital crimes, and federal evidences crimes, and organized crimes, and wedding forensics. An O'Neill family. I don't even know them. Increasingly a principal upskirt nature, they have roles with him and with sexual and medical offenders of kids. Also with the Leahy family that faked through the mail to other people they had conversations with me. Harvard Hospital won't communicate with me. In other words, get them on paper, one name in sequence. They have a bunch of people, intercities, inter-campuses, and intra-campuses involved with like a detective Samuda, also with relative rape threats and phone crime roles with that, with the FBI director involved, with their syntax on a Central Connecticut State University and roles with the business department, the business office, and other spots of the campuses involved before and after the World Trade Center attack. Whole bunch of people tied to Sammy Vega and Ray Hernandez, involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, Gail King people. Gail King is increasingly being recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed by WFSB and people associated with them and their sources, and interbranch and foreign. She has roles with them with fake conversations with WFSB pretended with me, intercities and intra-cities, multiple police departments involved with them with more sexual and medical offenders of kids. Bob Chase brought up the name Phil Cololo involved with it. And then after he confessed that, Phil Cololo was also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed involved with predicate X on my street. Only time I ever saw him on my street, swerving a bike after someone else had been swerving a bike a day or two before that and screamed out and repeated the name while I was looking at his phone. Also, the intercultural, intracultural, identity theft, fraud, slanders with the interbranch, fakes with them, with the same house/S. These are extended family members also recorded tied to, one of them said that they're related to people named Scalora. Weathersfield police have various natures of federal evidences, crimes, and switching names of people named Scalora, and sexual and medical offenders of kids with them, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, all kinds of criminally foreign influence uses of all natures of investigators. They are planting evidences on a Facebook page of Trinity, Central Connecticut State University too. They increasingly have a Fred Grisette and others like a Subby Bajero that didn't even go to my campus, who have collusions of people that were planting evidences behind my back that didn't even have classes with me. People that had classes with me too that I didn't have a conversation with. They're putting fake things in databases as their roles with the names directly and indirectly, interstates, intercities, involved with the World Trade Center attack. They're also inter and intra campuses, roles of predicate acts with fax methods. So increasingly, a Dr. Shub of modern languages has a wife reportedly, and you can't make it up. That works with a district court, and there are other a probate court. There are other probate courts involved with his neighbors too, involved with the people near me since I was a kid, involved with the retired police chiefs and foreign and domestic medical families, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and their educators in the background repeating fake things, and with people from off the campuses influencing that too, though. So that's why you need to get them on paper, one name and sequence, and I want a response for what I caught them doing and hiding, how they caught them hiding that, enforcing such, and with their kids involved. A Leahy family's got their kids, little girls in grammar school, and they're going between the schools. They have names at and next to the campuses tied to a Leahy family who have roles with planting evidences at and next to the campuses. The differences of guilt, use/S collusion too. Increasingly, people who have conversations with Mr. Hagenbart. So I don't know his first name. Uh, uh, Between the campuses with the gym class and the coaches, other coaches who have conversations with a John Maiano, involved increasingly with the same house, involved with people with courts. A bunch of people in the Britain Superior Court have a John Maiano involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids with him and people tied to him, and people who were in two. And he was in one of the times I had the two cooking classes. 2 times I was forced to take a speech class again. 2 times that people tied to a Kevin Dillon have collusion /S, also with the guy who said he's his partner, involved with people with home break-ins in my area through their roles with them with other federal evidences, crimes, and natures of predicate acts, and their collusions with the co-defendants and family members of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his lawyer in a 2006 case, district court case, who are increasingly with names involved before and after the World Trade Center attack, interstates, Connecticut, Washington, D.C., and New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, involved with the same house /S, involved with the police forging and switching names, fake conversations with me since I was a kid, and people who increasingly people tied to them with that. Whole bunch of people at Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed before and after the World Trade Center attack. They have relative roles of predicate acts there, and the difference of their guilt with predicate acts there or off campuses. Increasingly, they have collusion. There are collusions with corners of streets and corners of buildings, in ways that they can't afford to have discerned, because it's still manifest. But it's also the difference of them as victims /hyper victims or as predators that way. And overt criminal enterprises, the same thing with the foreign and mixed with them. Whole bunch of people tied to and Aaron Murphy have roles with Korea, also with medical offenders of kids tied to people named DeMauro, and we're involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and people involved with the home break-ins, and a Mike Roberts and Eric Jensen have roles. Some state police, families, and FBI interstates involved with them, also with the courts, and their roles all along the Burlington Turnpike and the Saustine Highway, and all along Route 175. They have collusions at corners on Route 75. People tied to proven child abusers, leaders of kids, First Forest, and their roles with more, and because part of the roles as intelligence families, but their only intelligence is criminally foreign evil. They hide and plot, faking more things rather than following mandated law, and get me off of fake conversations with WFSB and their collusions with that. Increasingly, Dr. Shub also brought his family involved with that, with Elm Street and Rocky Hill. Confessions were recorded and confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. He brought his daughter into it, his son, his wife, other campuses, in other words. And as people before and after the World Trade Center attack involved with the Washington, D.C., the intelligence community, criminally foreign influence, attacked. WFSB faked conversations with me about the World Trade Center attack with them. Get them on paper, one name and sequence, and get me off the fake conversations with them. There are intelligence next to them. People associated with them, like a Violet, is increasingly involved with all sides of criminal and civil cases of kids, and victims advocates involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and sexual and medical offenders of kids years apart, First Forest, and they're pretending they're legitimate as victims advocates. Get them on paper, one name and sequence. They have people at the corner of Saustine Highway and Town Line Drive increasingly involved with organized crimes with victims advocates and falsified police reports, wire crime acts and methods. Weathersfield Police have Weathersfield Pizza House and the businesses there at that corner, right? Saustine Highway and Town Line Drive, involved with them with names at other corners, like corners along Route 175, conjunctions to it and to that. WTNH has a bunch of federal evidences crimes and their sources, collusions with them, on and off campuses with more recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed child abusers, leaders of kids, and more and roles. And one of them said that Lance Cuddy is involved. One of the leaders involved of the kids that forced a principal child abuser, leader of kids, had more organized crimes rules. And with a former mayor Gold too, and his family members. They brought up a Lance Cuddy involved with it. He's also one of the ones on off the state corrections offices, involved with people named Kevin Dillon and a guy who said his partner, who made confessions to my speech class about his collusion, about his roles with the House and people associated with the corner of Fair Lane Drive and Carriage Hills Drive years before, and roles with Homebreak a year before, tied to the one with new people living there. I don't even believe, I don't know if they're from our country. God bless them too, by the way. We have a some-ancient trap. We're a bunch of fakes with their own differences. America, they can't speak for America. They can't speak for the other countries in other country. They have collusion /us with private criminal enterprises, criminally foreign influence, tax delusions, raw. You guys can't even follow mandated law and get people off fake conversations with the interbranch with their kids who are time collusions, forcing child abusers to their kids still. And one's years apart, more then and now. Get them the heck on paper. Yes, fake branches bow, but there is seed, fall.